I absolutely have gained muscle several times where I've been on bulking phases. Now I'm more concerned with, longevity. I did 40 miles on my 40th birthday last year. Wanted to do 41 this year, but I'm just relaunching my group coaching. But this whole idea that you can't add muscle with keto or with carnivore to me is nonsense. Of course, there's no studies on it. The only studies that we look at is they'll compare carbohydrates plus protein versus just protein, and I think in cell cultures, and yes, there is more of an anabolic effect with the carbs, but insulin is anabolic across the board. So I would argue that the type of weight that you gain is much higher quality. Muscle thickness is better.
Hey, it's good, man. Good to hear from you, Dan. Good to see you, man. How you been?
Man, it's always good to join you, and I'm sorry about that. My wife uses my Zoom, and I guess she put her one of her teammates on her business.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Because I was going to say I didn't think that was her name or anything like that. Oh, how are things? You're still in Florida, right?
Yes, sir. I literally just made it, man. I had a consult at 10:30, and I was 3 miles away, and I had to boogie over here. It went over a little bit.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're doing it live or doing it in person then? Okay.
Yeah, but no, man, it's always great to join you. I was excited to get back with you and catch up. It's always good to catch up, and this community continues to grow. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Yeah, I'm in. I was just saying you're in Florida. I'm in Montana. I was just telling, but it was minus 30 degrees the other day here, so it's cold, but we're toughing it out. But anyway, looks like you've gotten real scrawny and skinny from the looks of things. Looking good. Good to see. Well, tell I guess for people that haven't met you or haven't been aware of what you do, can you just kind of give us a little history about your background, Dan, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I played college football. I was always into strength and conditioning, and nutrition was one of those things that I was always into. I kind of took a break from my first career was I was the head strength and conditioning coach for VCU basketball in Virginia. And after a few years of doing that, I went home. I started to chase the money. I did 3 years of pharmaceutical sales and then another 8 years in medical device sales. And about 2011 was when I started CrossFit. And after 2 years of doing that, it's interesting that CrossFit was what got me back into strength and conditioning because people think about it as, something that's so metabolically driven, but it really got me back into the love of lifting. So I started to power lift in 2013. 2015 had a torn meniscus, and finally 2016 it was just so painful that I pulled out of my last meet, and I did 4 months of just dieting because I was 240, 245 at the time. And towards the end of it, I was doing like a typical bodybuilding diet. I got really lean. I got really miserable. And I had a buddy who was doing graduate work with Jacob Wilson and Ryan Lowry here in Tampa, and he kept telling me about this keto diet. And I was just like, "What are you talking about, man? This is nonsense." And finally, towards the end, I had lost weight, took some pressure off of my knee, and I decided, you know what, what's the harm? I'll try this ketogenic diet. And I swear 2 days later, because my fat was already low, all I had, and my carbs were already like under 100, all I really had to do was increase my fat. And within a few days, my joints felt so much better. I had so much more energy. And, I told him to send me everything he had on keto. So he sent me like 40 something published papers. I started to read. And 2 months later, I reached out to Brian, if you remember Brian Williamson, Keto Evangelist.
Yeah, of course.
And so I told him, "Hey man, if you ever want to do anything with athletes," I didn't know what it looked like, but I just reached out to him. And it just so happened he was starting the Ketogenic Athlete podcast. He interviewed me. We really hit it off, and he's like, "You gotta co-host this thing with me." So that's what really got us started. And to answer your question, like what I'm all about, like I really have been focusing on the performance side of it. Really trying to tease away not only the therapeutic side, because so many people were focused on 15% to 20% protein and 5% carbs, and I knew that there had to be some more context there, and so we just started to look at it from every single athlete that you can think of. We had everyone from fighters. We had Matt Brown on. We had, pro football players. My buddy Aaron, he was the strength coach for the Giants, and now he's the head strength coach for Indiana. Even he and I were talking about this, and throughout the years, one thing that surprised me was I was always very careful because I was in all these different groups, athlete group, and they're very carb driven. But I told them after a while, I was like, listen, there has to be at least a time of the year when you lower your carbs. You can, reduce inflammation. You can kind of reset your hunger hormones. And more, I've gotten more aggressive with suggesting that even for high intensity stuff, even for things like football, it works. And Aaron and I just caught up this January, and he was telling me that he had guys in season for the Giants that were eating ketogenic. And, 2017, a year after I was doing the ketogenic diet, Brian was like, I've been hearing about this carnivore thing. He had Amber O'Hearn on, and we decided to do a month of just salmon and anything from a cow. And halfway through that, they told me about this Shawn Baker guy. They're like, you got to look at this guy, Shawn Baker. This was back in August of 2017. And I was like, who is this guy? And so we were one of the first carnivores, I was really strict carnivore 2017 all the way through 2018. 2019 started to play around with adding carbs, and I did like a whole year of that. I'm back at carnivore. The only thing I do eat that's not carnivore is I crush those keto bricks, Robert's keto bricks. I love them. Kind of scratches that itch for me. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Well, nice, Danny. Yeah, I mean, and what do you weigh right now, by the way? I'm just trying to get your weight right now.
I'm about 225.
Okay. Because I'm sitting at about 240 right now, and you're right around what, 6, or where are you at on height?
Yeah, right around 6. I'm just under 6. I'm getting more comfortable with saying 6 because my wife says you don't have to say 5'11" and 3/4. So I'll say 6.
There you go. Awesome. Obviously, you've been able to sustain this, and this is, one of the big things out there is, when you listen to the sort of the mainstream dietitian, it's like, well, you can lose weight on a ketogenic diet or maybe they'll mention carnivore diet, but they'll basically say, but it's unsustainable. No one can do it. And, you've got people that clearly, I don't know how many years you just rattled off, 7, 8, 9 years or something like that. I started doing ketogenic diets back in, God, what year was it? 2011 or something, 2012, I think. So I've been doing it 10 years. I've been doing low carb, now carnivore. And, I just put up a picture of me at 55 and said, what I do, I eat meat and eggs and fish and mostly red meat. And every once in a while I have a piece of birthday cake, and that works well for me. And I've had some of Robert's keto bricks, and I was supposed to interview him. I think we had to reschedule because I was traveling on Monday. I was flying up here to Montana, and, they are bricks. So, they're hard.
Yeah. That they're, some of them are harder, some of them are softer, man. I really do love them. The whole idea of, what the dietitians say, I gotta say, man, even with bodybuilders, I had a client last year who started with me. She was 163. She had 26% body fat on the DEXA, which I consider that the gold standard. And 4 months later, she lost 15 pounds and she got down to 9.9% on the DEXA. She literally lost 15 pounds of fat. And so when I hear about this idea of using it for dieting, and it's, you lose muscle and you're not going to maintain muscle, or you're not going to put on muscle, it's nonsense to me, because I don't think there's anything better. And Ryan and Jacob have done studies on this. They've looked at this. They've compared cyclic ketogenic diets to standard, putting people in deficits. And there's something, dare I say, anabolic about ketones, because, when these other guys, they lost the same amount of weight as the strict keto guys, but the keto guys strict maintain much more lean body mass. And then even my testosterone, I was 60 points higher on my testosterone at 30, at 35 than I was at 27. And I know that's just one snapshot, but we're being told that testosterone, and generally testosterone goes down with age. And, I haven't seen that. Now, I was a little bit lower this time around, but I mean, what goes up must come down, you know?
Well, I mean, to be fair, Dan, I mean, your testosterone changes throughout the day. I might swing
Yeah.
20% from morning to afternoon. So it's a pretty dynamic number. So I don't get too excited. I look at, what's going on, strength, size, composition, and stuff like that. And one of the things, um, I guess one of the knocks on keto early on was it was a relatively low protein for a lot of people. I mean, I think we're seeing a little people appreciating protein more. And I don't know if that's the case. You mentioned 15% protein for the average American, which is, in my view, woefully too low. And I think, once you start getting, eating some more steaks and whatever, you're starting to see more closer to, 25, 30%, typically. Um, it's interesting, you talk about the anabolic effect of ketones, and I don't know, I honestly don't know that I've looked into that to a significant degree, but I certainly know cholesterol. There's studies looking at, whole eggs versus just egg whites. Even if the protein is matched, we see better muscle protein synthesis. Same thing with, skim milk versus whole milk. We see muscle protein synthesis, and the thought is, cholesterol. There was actually a study done in, I think, 2013, where they looked at people eating a lower cholesterol diet. It was like 200 milligrams versus a higher cholesterol diet, which is 800 milligrams. Which, to put that in perspective, 800 milligrams is about 4 ribeye steaks. So that's a lot of cholesterol, right? And the ones that were on the high cholesterol diet had more muscle mass, and everything else, the calories were equated and all that type of stuff. And so I think cholesterol has an effect there. And I think when you're eating a ketogenic diet, almost by definition, you're eating higher cholesterol. I think it's fair to say, unless you're just eating, I don't know, protein powder and, something else. I mean, I guess you'd be eating, canola oil, which none of us would recommend. How much muscle have you, like I said, you talk about retention of muscle or gaining muscle. I mean, a lot of people will say that you can't gain muscle without carbohydrates. Have you found that to be true?
Not at all. The first couple of years, I wasn't focused on putting on any muscle, and I was maintaining it. But back in 2019, I started hanging out with Ben. You met Ben Pekulski, right? My bodybuilder buddy.
Yeah, I met him in
KetoCon, right?
at some event. I can't remember what it was. We went out to a steakhouse. I remember. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, yeah. That's when we had that big carnivore meetup. Yep. And he taught me, different training methods as far as like how to, which was completely the opposite of what I've always done. I've always done maximum efficiency, speed,
Right.
power, and just learning how to get more inefficient, learning how to contract your muscles throughout the whole range of motion, and just applying those concepts with eating enough protein, like you mentioned, it's huge. I keep it simple. Everybody loves macro calculators and tracking. I just tell them, look, if you're trying to gain muscle, set your protein to your desired body weight, and that's a good place to start. So if you're 200, you want to hit 220, start at 220. If you find that you're not getting enough calories, you're having to add a bunch of fat, then add more protein. And when you apply that with managing your stress, all the things that people should be doing, eating enough is a big one. I know about this, but a lot of people is like, I can't gain muscle. Like no matter how much I eat, and I'm just like, you're just not eating enough. You got to eat more. And that's something that I for years would just pile down the food. And when you apply those things, when you rest enough, and when you actually get into the set and you really go internally and you go really, really hard, I absolutely have gained muscle several times where I've been on bulking phases. Now I'm more concerned with, longevity. I did 40 miles on my 40th birthday last year. Wanted to do 41 this year, but I'm just relaunching my group coaching. But this whole idea that you can't add muscle with keto or with carnivore, to me, is nonsense. Of course, there's no studies on it. The only studies that we look at is they'll compare carbohydrates plus protein versus just protein, and I think in cell cultures, and yes, there is more of an anabolic effect with the carbs, but insulin is anabolic across the board. So I would argue that the type of weight that you gain is much higher quality. Muscle thickness is better. If you're used to gaining 30 pounds over 6 months on a hardcore bulk, but you only gain 15 or 20, this way, analyze, how what type of weight you've gained. I would argue you probably gained much better weight. And who needs to gain all that weight anyways? I think people have these unrealistic ideas. And I know that we live in a culture where people want to look a certain way. But that being said, like if you're doing this the right way and you're doing it with that big picture, long game approach, you have less fluctuations. You look the same every day. You feel the same every day. Your menu's simple. You can maintain a healthy body weight without having to track. It's so simple, man. And I personally most of the time eat two meals a day. Sometimes with my bodybuilders, I'll do 3 up to 4, depending. But if you're trying to put on muscle, one of the things that people argue is, for optimal muscle protein synthesis, kind of spacing out your protein. You and I know that you're going to absorb all the protein you eat. Maybe there's an argument that, if you pace it a little bit better, there's better muscle protein synthesis. But regardless, it's a pretty darn simple way to add muscle, and you get that added benefit of that metabolic advantage. You're burning more fat. You're better, easier to recomp. Even if you're just trying to gain muscle, you'll find that you burn more fat. So across the board, man, it's one of those things that we're going to still be here screaming from the rooftops, and people are still going to be arguing with us.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of points for. I mean, I've had the privilege and honor, to interview Stu Phillips and Don Layman a couple of times, and I've asked them on multiple occasions. Also, Jose Antonio, who's down there by you guys,
Oh yeah.
about the necessity for carbs and building muscle. And they basically say for muscle protein synthesis, carbohydrates are not required as long as you hit adequate protein. There's no further benefit for spiking insulin higher. There's a minimal amount. Once you hit it, you're good. You've got it as long as you get enough leucine to trigger the mTOR. Carbs don't add to that. The other thing that I asked Don about, I said, you've got these studies showing 30 grams, every 4 hours or whatever seems to be well suited to muscle protein synthesis. But I said, well, what happens if I eat a pound and a half of steak? He goes, we don't really know because we've never done studies on this stuff. It's getting expensive or something. It's like they don't know. And my thought is, and it's not just my thought. We know that our gastrointestinal transit time, our digestion just slows down, so we can extract all that nutrition out there. It's not like we're crapping out steaks, something like that. It's all being absorbed. So that protein is getting absorbed just in a more steadier state. So we don't really have an idea on that. But I agree with you about these guys that say, I can't gain muscle. I mean, you got to eat till it hurts sometimes. I mean, you got to eat until you're literally uncomfortable, and then 3 hours later, do it again and do it again and do it again. And it's not fun. If you look at any of these big, giant strongmen, I mean, they're constantly just gorging themselves, and they're pretty miserable. Eating's hard. I mean, you think you'd like it, you can eat all you want, but then when you start to have to force feed yourself, it's not that fun, And it's a lot of stuff. And, like I said, from the protein standpoint, I mean, I'm using 300 grams or more most days. I mean, sometimes 400, 500, 600 even on some kind of crazy days I do. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Well, let's talk about, I know you, because I follow you on social media, man, and I see, obviously you're talking about the diet, nutrition, and you're in the gym, and that's the other thing, like I said, I'm I train at home, and so I could do, and I think the thing that Ben was talking about, making it as inefficient as possible, so you're really, you're not trying to, you can't lift as much weights when it's inefficient. When I'm trying to deadlift, I want everything as efficient as possible. And now, particularly during jiu-jitsu, it's the opposite of weightlifting. It's everything is efficiency and don't use as much strength. And it's a whole different ball game. But obviously, strength is still going to be a benefit at times. But that sort of, make it as hard as possible. Let's give an example for those people that don't understand. Like, how would you apply one of Ben's principles or something you're doing now if your goal is to put on muscle? And my goal has really not been to put on a lot of muscle. I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm not training for maximum size. I'm training more for performance and efficiency typically, and strength, which is different from muscle building. But if we're talking about muscle building, what does Ben, because he's a bodybuilder, and that's what does he do?
Yeah, so I would say the most applicable concept is called SSI. So it's like 3 things to think about. It's setting up for your anatomy. So someone with a bigger, wider chest is gonna perform a lift differently than someone with a more narrow chest. One that I always love to use is femur length, because I'm sure you're good in the same areas that I'm good, just a much taller version. But us with long femurs, we squat differently. We're usually going to do low bar squats. We're usually going to bend over more. We're going to recruit more of the posterior chain. So, for example, with femur length and the length of your torso, someone like me who has always had really strong hamstrings and really strong glutes. If I really want to develop my vastus medialis, that inner quad muscle, and the VMO, which is that muscle, that teardrop right by the knee, I'm going to have to increase the angle of my knee. So I'm going to have to elevate my heels to get a better knee angle. Because if I just squat regularly, I'm just going to continue to recruit those glutes and hamstrings. So doing that, and then so that's the setting up for your anatomy. Stabilize is, whereas on a bench for a powerlifting or where you're looking for leverage, this is the opposite. So you're not trying to perform the most efficient. You're actually trying to really isolate muscle groups. So stabilize would mean if I'm doing a bicep curl, I'm not going to want to do a front raise with my shoulder to get more weight. So I really want to stabilize my shoulder joint and make sure that the only joint that's moving is my elbow. And then the most important one, which I think has been really useful for me, is initiate. So the way we initiate an exercise, for example, if I really want to contract my quad muscles in the lengthened position. So my knees are, let's say this is the angle of my knee, and I know that as I extend my knee, that I'm really going to get a good contraction in the flexed position. How am I able to contract the muscle in the lengthened position? And that's the way I initiate the movement. So I'll give you a few examples. If I want to really get a good contraction on a bicep curl, let's say I'm doing and these are all things that you don't do, but this is like all the stuff that I've been doing lately in the last couple of years, like a preacher curl. That's when your arm is resting on that preacher and you want to contract it in that lengthened position. When you initiate the movement, you're going to flex your tricep, and you're going to notice that the tension is all going to come from the distal portion of your bicep, because everybody can do this part. Everybody can flex their chest when they're doing this part, but how do we get that contraction in the lengthened position? It's the way we initiate. So if we're doing a bench, instead of really getting tight and doing all the things that we would do for powerlifting, I'm going to drive my traps and my rhomboids into the bench as I push off the bar off my chest, and I'll notice that in the distal portion of my pecs that I'm getting that contraction. So those things I've noticed have been really huge for me. Just learning how to, and it takes, getting rid of your ego, because a lot of the time, like you said, because we're getting more inefficient, we have to lower the weight. But when you can really contract the crap out of your muscles, you don't even need weight. Of course, when you can standardize that stimulus, and let's say if you were recording yourself, every single rep looks exactly the same day in and day out, then you can increase the weight. But most people don't understand that muscles aren't really, when you're trying to contract a muscle, it's not the weight that it senses. It's sensing distance, the distance of the lever and the tension. And so if we can really optimize that, then we can get stronger, and then we can increase the weight. And like I said, I'll see guys, much smaller than me that are doing more weight. But if you're training for bodybuilding and you're really trying to increase the size of your muscles, also the rep schemes, that's another thing that I think the best rep schemes for ketogenic is, it ends up being a different type of hypertrophy. You have your sarcoplasmic, which is your big bodybuilder, full muscle bellies. And then you have your, I forget the name, the different hypertrophy,
Hyperplasia?
No, there's sarcoplasmic, and then and I always forget this one, but hyperplasia is possible too. Usually, I think, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like when you have a bunch of cells that they're already saturated, whether they're fat or muscle, there is a possibility of hyperplasia. But when you do that heavier lifting with better form versus, those drop sets and really glycolytic. I find that that's better for a ketogenic diet. And the bonus of that is that your strength levels will continue to increase along with your muscle size versus when you're doing this other really high rep, high volume bodybuilding training, your strength will increase, but it'll eventually level off as your muscles continue to increase. And who doesn't want to be stronger? So that's why I really like the other the other way, which I'm forgetting the name of it.
Yeah, I mean, and when we look at the data on longevity,
Oh, it's
it's really
myofibrillar. Myofibrillar. There you go. Myofibrillar. There you go. Go ahead. Sorry.
so when we look at the data on longevity, there's a few studies out there looking at like quad strength and grip strength and things like that. Strength seems to have a better correlate to longevity, and so I tell people be very strong for your size and weight, and that can be helpful, as far as that. And I'm not, like I said, I appreciate bodybuilding, but I'm not sure that being Mr. Olympia gives you any longevity benefit just for being strong and still have decent muscle on you. But I mean, because you could, I've been 300 pounds before, and I was stronger than I am now, but I was 300 pounds, and so I'm sitting at 240, but I think I feel like I'm probably better off from a health and longevity standpoint. I mean, what's the heaviest you ever got up to, Danny? I mean,
I got up to like 245, and now being 225, it's such a better balance. And Stu McGill, the back guy.
I know of him. I don't know him personally, but I know he's very well respected with cardiac back rehab. Sure.
Yeah, he's brilliant. And to your point, what he talks about is the ability to be strong for a long time. When you were deadlifting 800, you were doing one rep, and versus what you're doing now with that big old swinging that big kettlebell, it's a much more resilient back. It just, no question. Like, people say a strong back is a healthy back, but a strong back that can take a pounding is really, that's the holy grail there, not the maximum one rep max.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like muscular endurance, because what we do typically throughout the day as an endurance-based life, typically, I mean, every once in a while you'll be called on a maximal lift, but that's pretty rare. I mean, you think about your day-to-day function, how often are you required to lift as heavy as possible outside of training? Just in your day-to-day activities, it's more, sub-maximal lifts, but repetitively in many cases. And I know that, for instance, there's a nice study came out looking at injury prevention for athletes, whether chronic injury or even acute injury. And the number one preventative thing you can do is be stronger. I mean, stronger tops everything, better than flexibility, better than proprioceptive training. It's just get stronger, particularly across, joints, and, obviously these compound lifts and even the isolation lifts across the joints are going to protect that undoubtedly. So, but I was mentioning, I see your social media, and obviously part of it is what we're talking about now, but you also talk a lot about your kids, and how you guys kind of raise them in a way that many people today just put plug their kids into a computer or a video game or a cell phone or whatever, and it seems like they're kind of almost delegating the raising of the kids to the schools and the media. I don't think that's what you're doing. At least that's my impressions. Do you mind chatting about that a little bit, Danny?
Man, I could talk about this forever. I can really. This is I'm most passionate about this. So, um, on one side, I understand that most people are on different parts of their journey. So a lot of people are coming in and they may be watching this and they may have 12, 13, 14, 15 year olds. And they're going to say, well, it's much harder to change to this type of way that I'm about to describe at this age. I understand that. I understand there's an advantage of, from the minute they were born, they were outside and we were, but it's never too late, So my boys are outside all the time, and you can really tell what a kid's priority is, and what they love most based on what they ask for their birthdays and things like that. My boys don't have video games. My boys don't have any laptops or screens or phones or anything like that. All they have is a garage full of like skateboards and outdoor stuff. They're always outside, and that comes from creating a culture in the house, and a lot of the time kids will say, I'm bored, and they'll say, and we always say, look, if you're bored, you're boring. So, go do something that's not boring. So when it's a pretty day outside, which most days it is here in Florida, I'll tell them to go outside. Now, as far as from the exercise and activity standpoint, that's something that we've baked into our lifestyle. So on the weekends, we are with each other all the time. I take my boys. I do papi days. So basically, I rotate between doing like every 2 weeks, I'll take one son by ourselves and we're doing something. So I'll take one of them to go do archery at our local place here in Brandon. Sometimes Ben joins with his kids, and then on the other 2 weeks, I'll be with the other one. And I read a book before I even had kids. It was called Wild at Heart, and that was like a big, really instrumental book for me because it talks about that, and I know that I'm only focusing on men, but I think this applies for everybody. But with men, the question is like, do I have what it takes to be a man? And most of the time, if a father doesn't pass that torch to his son and say at some point, you're a man now, it doesn't have to exactly be explicit, but there has to be a point in their life when they get that, then it injures the boy and it creates this false self. So they'll become the wuss, or they'll become the womanizer, or all these different suboptimal versions of themselves. And you can't tell your son that he's a man if he doesn't earn that, because in the back of his mind he'll probably think, I didn't really earn that, so that this is BS. So that's always been part of my life. So I put my kids in I have to put them in adversity and make them experience adversity. So whether it's getting in cold water or swimming with stingrays, or getting lost on a hike, which is easy for me because I have the worst sense of direction. So one day we got lost on a hike and we went like 6 miles. And that day was the first time that Desmond came up with a mantra, so now you got this mantra that when things get hard, and all the guys and all the women and all the people in the world who are able to keep their words to themselves, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. When things get sucky, when the weather changes, they keep going. They weren't born that way. That can only be trained. So on one hand, there's that side of it. There's the idea that screens are toxic, and that I'm sure they have their place. But in our house, one of our neighbors gave our sons an Xbox, and that thing's a paperweight. They're never on it, and so that's creating a culture. And we created that culture in the whole block. Our kids, there's always like a gang of kids now that are together, and we were the ones starting. And then slowly but surely, the parents started peeking their head out and said, well, maybe it's okay for my kid to be outside too. And then on the other side, when it comes to food, where we teach them, and they basically eat carnivore, because I would be lying if I said they ate paleo, because they usually just eat steaks. But they'll eat fruit, they'll eat vegetables. Desmond he has these times where he'll just make mushrooms at night, or he'll eat green peppers. He's weird like that. But we've created that from when they were born, and I don't buy them junk food, but I do let them buy themselves junk food if they want to. So a few Sundays ago, Desmond and these kids, they made a lemonade stand, and they made like $24 between 6 of them. And each of them had $4, and they walked to the local Walmart, and they all got a bunch of candy, and they felt like crap the day after. But he worked all day on Sunday to earn that money to buy himself the junk. So I think it's a healthy way for us. We're aware that we don't want to create neurotic people, but then at the same time, we do have guardrails. We do have conversations about diet. And the main goal is that when they grow up, not that they're going to eat perfectly, which I do hope they do that, but it's more important to me is that when something goes wrong health-wise, they're going to know that it's more important to figure out what's in my lifestyle, what's in my diet that I can change. Other than that, I'm really big on freedom for these kids. We give them maximum freedom and responsibility. We don't risk life or limb, but we do let them take risks and do all types of stuff. These kids are launching rockets and doing all types of stuff. And It's huge for me. I noticed that they're just different, and they're okay with being different, because think about it, they're homeschooled, they eat different than everybody else, we're Christian, and I think that's really important because they're immune to this groupthink that we see today, which is it's sad because it's a lot of our kids are really influenced by their peers. But man, I could go on forever about that. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and just I just wanted to follow up this, and it sounds like it turned out way, but I mean, it was a couple of years ago. One of your boys was hit by a car and had a pretty significant injury, and everything turned. Do you mind sharing that? And he turned out okay, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was basically 5 minutes away from the house. We had Rachel Gregory in town. If you ever met her, good friend of ours. We were going to record a podcast, and they were with the nanny, and they were about to cross the street. And Desmond usually looks out for his brother. The front of our neighborhood is there's a bunch of stuff there. There's two dog parks, the mailboxes for the neighborhood, the pool, and the clubhouse, and Dean was on this little Ziggle scooter, and as soon as he goes to cross the street, this guy's pulling out of one of the mailbox parking, and he literally ran my son over, like completely ran him over. That I ended up seeing it 3 days later or 5 days later when we got back from the hospital, because my neighbor had the camera. And it was the hardest day of our lives, the hardest couple of days of our lives. But his ear was torn off. His he uh, tore a few ligaments in his cervical spine. But other than that, just bad road rash, but nothing with his internal organs, no brain damage, nothing. And it was an amazing experience. It was the best that situation could have turned out, because we went through adversity as a family and we handled it awesome. And they had a great team. He had like 100 hands that were touching him, and taking care of him here at All Children's in St. Pete. And so that I was still a medical device rep those days. I was basically trying to make my transition out to do this full time, and I had 2 weeks left of vacation, and that was kind of like my final indicator that it was time to quit. So I took the rest of my vacation for the year, because we homeschool, and I think homeschool is a misnomer because we're never home. So we didn't want Desmond to miss out from all his normal activities. So Maura took Desmond for those 2 weeks. I was with Dean for those 2 weeks, and our relationship got the best it's ever gotten. And then, I quit my job after that, and Dean's doing great, man. Dean's you got to see him. Hopefully, he'll be a KetoCon. He'll be running around, and his ear was the surgeon was he was awesome. The plastic surgeon, he's like, look, I usually got to create an ear. I got the ear, it's like it's there. All I got to do is stitch it up. And he's like, you very how people are very careful with what they say, and he's like, I'll tell you, there's zero chance of deformity, and you wouldn't be able to tell, man. He reattached that ear. He had a neck brace for like 6 weeks, and now he's perfectly normal.
So that's awesome to hear. That's really good. And like my kids probably eat a very similar diet. I mean, they definitely get a lot of it's like dinner at my house every single night. Literally, I go out and I barbecue up some kind of steak or some sort of something. I got something going on with meat, and then there's some cheese I'll cut up, and then there's some fruit, and that's what they eat. And I eat the meat, and everybody else eats. Occasionally, I'll have some cheese. Once in a while, I'll grab a piece of fruit. But it's but the kids are eating that, and then breakfast is usually eggs and something else, and again, minimal junk food, and he's doing great. I mean, he's fluent in French. He's pretty good in Spanish. He's becoming very good at piano. He's doing jujitsu. He's a little 9-year-old kid. He's an expert skier. So I mean, he's got I'll tell you what, as a kid, he had a hell of a lot better than I did.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. I tell my kids they're the rich kids. They would have been my rich friends.
yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, because I grew up on Captain Crunch and Frankenberry and God,
Yes.
I mean, there was some of that. You didn't have we just didn't have the resources to do all these things. I think it's unfortunate. It might have been better, because when I was a kid, just go outside, play with the kids, neighborhood football, baseball, whatever, tag, hide and go seek, go exploring in the forest, and that's what we did. But I grew up in the 70s, and now you just don't see that as much. particularly in the cities and stuff. And it's kind of nice being up here in Montana because it's so wide open. And of course, we're skiing, but we just moved to the country up in Washington State, and that's pretty cool. We're just out on 5 acres, and it's horses and cows around. I feel safe when there's cows around for some reason. I remember we flew into Bozeman on Monday, and driving in, I saw just thousands of Black Angus cattle. I'm like, this is a good place for me.
Yeah, I would say Montana's as good a state as any besides Florida right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I'll tell you that 20 below is a little chilly. We were on a sleigh ride last night, and it was literally like, I don't know, 15 below zero. It was cold.
Yeah.
But it was pretty damn cold. And anyway, what is, I know you've been involved in a lot of projects over the years, different things. I know you guys would do I think you did like retreats down in Mexico and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys still do? What's the story on that? Or are you still doing that stuff?
Man, I was so excited about that because that was I invested like 9 months setting that up, and we got on 2020 of all years, we had 100 people down in Tulum. We took them to Tulum Jungle Gym. We did workouts every morning. It was a fitness themed retreat, and the feedback was awesome. And last year we were going to buy 100 rooms. So because everybody was like, we're coming back, we'll bring friends. And we were expecting 250 people. This was even before the jab mandate started. As soon as they started the testing, I was like, this is not going to work because I can't promote this. I'm not going to ask people. I don't want to do it. I don't want to, and I know there's various opinions on this, but I'm very, just a hard no for me with all that stuff. So I basically decided last February, it was getting close. We were going to do the next one in May of 2021. Last February, I decided I'm done with this. Now, my next idea is I'd like to do an in-person event with just men, like a total of 15 tops. And that would be this year. And that's all going to be domestic, everything domestic. Probably in Tampa, probably only in Florida. They can come to me because it's just I wouldn't ask people to do anything that I wouldn't do. So that's why. And 2020 we loved to travel. That was a huge part of with the boys. We wanted to take them around the world and just be able to have them see what really goes on in places versus what they're told. So that when someone says something, they'd be like, that's not true. I was just there, But that changed. But in Mexico, I would say in 2020, we went 4 times. We went to Tulum, we went to Playa del Carmen twice, and we went to, even on the West Coast, we went out to Cabo, and things were pretty good. And then we went back in 2021 the first time, and they were asking our kids to wear the masks outside. And, my kids they're just not having that, so it was like they were calling me, come get your kid, he's not wearing this thing. And so Mexico started to get to that point. So the international travel is a no-go for me now. But I definitely loved the idea of having people just be with a group of people. I love the idea of that community aspect. People seem to do well. That's why this community does so well. People are even though everybody's spread out, you got a bunch of people who are like-minded, who understand. They're really getting great benefits from doing what the experts tell them not to do, and so it's easier for them to trust their instinct, trust their intuition, and even just having you as an example is so great because I tell people there's nobody more scientific than Dr. Baker. Because he really says the truth, which is like, we don't know, all the things that people are so positive about what they say, and they speak with such authority because there's some sort of epidemiological study or there's some conventional wisdom that's usually based on a terrible premise. So I think that's really good. And just having people that not only are like-minded, but also there's an extra level of accountability. Like, I can do this. Look, so-and-so's doing this. So I do think still there needs to be, community is important, and it's something that we should be. I'm going to talk about this year at KetoCon.
Yeah, I mean, the community has been invaluable. I think anybody that's here will certainly agree to that. I mean, that's why they're here in the first place. There's information sharing, there's support, motivation, accountability, all those things that go into that. And and I appreciate the compliment. I mean, there's plenty of smart people out there, but I mean, I just don't think we just don't know, and that's the problem. And I think you can be very sciencey and say scientific things and quote studies, but at the end of the day, we're like, well, this is just a small component of the incredible complexity of the human body, and just to think that we know it all. And I just go back to first principles. What's the effect? What's the overall effect? And then again, is it important to you? It's like, I mean, goodness gracious, my HDL went up 4 points. Is that really that important to me, or is it, do I really care about that? No, oftentimes the answer is, I think about it. No, what I really care about is, am I smiling? Am I happy? Do I feel good?
Yeah.
And that's all we all want as humans. I think, no matter what our background, and kudos for you for sticking to your guns on your beliefs, and whether you agree or not, I think you should be you should have some, if you have convictions, I think it's your moral imperative to follow through on that. And I, like you, I'm pretty pro freedom. Again, I'm not going to get into what's right or what's wrong, but I think most of us would probably fall in that category. I think you would, about different things, different issues. And I think it's, we kind of hyper focus over the last years about one particular medical issue, but you think about the average person, they just want to be kind of, let me do what I want to do. Let me have my individual ability to do what I do, and let that. That's what drives creativity and the wonderfulness of all what makes us diverse. And we're the same, but yet we have this diversity that makes it would be very boring if we all looked and thought and talked the same way, right? It would be like, what is the point?
Yeah, my son's always talking about that because you know how they parrot things back to you, and that when something's sticking because they'll repeat it back to you, and that's one thing that he's always saying. My oldest especially is like, we so and so said this, but it would be boring if we all had the same opinion, and that's the bottom line. Like, people really don't want what that is. That's terrible, because most of the time, first of all, it's impossible. Second of all, it can only come through coercion. So it's to me, it's a pretty easy one to just be like, no, I want to stay away from that.
Yeah, I just, you said you're in. I wish I'd have realized that, Dan. I couldn't remember in Florida. I was in Tampa a few months ago. We had a
Oh man.
I did meet with Ann Bosworth, Dr. Boz,
Yeah.
we met, and I think I went to her place, and she was really nice, and it was over Thanksgiving actually when we were there. So I'm sure we'll get back down. We really like Florida, and we it's like living in Washington State is beautiful. It's nice. But it's cold in the wintertime relatively. I was I had spent, when I grew up, I lived in, Illinois and Indiana, and lived in Wyoming. So I was used to really cold places. And then I moved down to Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and California. I lived there for like 25 years. So I kind of got wimpy when it came to the cold. So now I'm trying to get used to it again. And it's kind of like, I definitely prefer the warm to the cold. I think we all do for the most part, but it seems to, brighten your mood, I think, a little bit. What else, Danny? I mean, we talked about ketogenic diets. We talked about training. Are you finding anything else? I mean, are you a guy that runs around barefoot? Sunshine important to you? What are you finding is important as far as your overall, I guess, overall well-being?
Well, definitely, the shoes thing is huge for me. I only wear, ever since forgot who it was, actually Jamie Seaman introduced me to the guys at Vivo Barefoot, and so I've been wearing these only. So that's been really important to me because I've always, I have flat feet, but sunshine is huge. That's one of the things, like the whole managing stress thing, and that's been really important to me because a lot of people, they'll do all these things that they see. They'll just throw them all in a bucket. So they'll do like intermittent fasting and extended fasting and all these things, and they're doing all these really stressful things, and they're not looking at their allostatic load. They're not looking at their overall stress bucket. And so I just had that consult earlier today. This woman wants to put on muscle, and so I said, if you can get the calories that I'm going to give you in 2 meals, go for it. But it might be better to do 3 meals. I think that's one thing that people really, they focus on what they think is going to work, and especially with respect to like fat burning. So I think it's really important to do all this like cold immersion, all that stuff. I personally like I do my sauna every morning. I got a little, one person sauna. It's literally like a heating pad and a dome. And my buddy Jake, he's a big pro wrestler, and I just introduced him to the sauna company, and because there's lots of other stuff out there now, and there's all our air's not as clean. There's all types of stuff. So sauna is, a nice little hormetic stressor, and then it makes that cold shower after easier. Now, of course, I can't get a cold shower. My cold shower lasts about 30 seconds because our pipes are about a foot deep. And even in the winter, our water's not going to get too cold. But if I could afford one of those big tanks, I'm sure I can get one of those horse troughs. But I think the cold immersion is good. Getting out in the sun is something that's huge. If you're in Florida and you have low vitamin D, I think that's just weird because we have so much sun. So I definitely get out in the sun a lot. Friday's a day, for example, that I'll walk to the gym. It's close to 3 miles. I'll walk out there. I'll get my lift in at 7:30. I'll sit at Starbucks and do some consults for a few hours. Today I didn't pack any food, so I went to Wendy's and got 6 patties. And they know me already. They're like, "How many today?" It's either going to be 4, 5, 6. And sat down, did my consult, and then walked back. So that whole time I'm out in the sun, and I really do feel so good in the sun. And a lot of people are stuck in office buildings. I'm just trying to help people think about all the other things other than that hour and a half that they're in the gym. So, setting a timer every like 75 minutes to just walk around for 5 minutes, getting outside as much as you can, getting outside with as little on as possible as you can. And other than that, in the nighttime, that's another thing that I try to just, when I do my consults, when I'm doing my intake, I'm asking them, what time are you going to sleep? What time do you generally cut off your food? How much screen time are you getting? What are you doing at night? And there's so many things, like little things that people can do to improve their sleep. I remember reading about when I was really getting into this stuff, like the incandescent light bulb right there, we lost I think it was like 90 minutes of sleep a night, like boom, just like that. And that's the incandescent light bulb. When you look at the lumens on the stuff that we have now, so all that stuff is really important to me. So I really try to weave that in and get people to look at that because that 1 hour that you're working out is just 1 hour. I mean, who'd have thought we would have sedentary athlete syndrome? Like it's just weird, we don't move as much anymore. So I really like the low impact walking stuff every day. I do a ton of walking, and I really tell people to do that. Even just going out for that, getting that last meal and then going out for one more walk after that. That seems to be across the board. It doesn't matter what diet you do. Good for your brain, good for your heart. So all that stuff I think is really important, and I definitely weave that in.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Sedentary athletes, and most people don't realize that even if you train, most of your caloric expenditure is going to be what you do throughout the day, and so the more time you spend sedentary, and I'm not where I'm normally at because I'm staying at a friend's house, and I don't have a place to really kind of hiding in a room here. But normally I'm standing when I do most of my interviews, and I usually have the philosophy if I can sit, can I stand? If I stand, can I walk? And that's kind of how I operate. And the other thing is having dogs, they got to get walks. And so that works well too. So buy a dog if you're trying to get somebody to motivate you to get after it. Well, Danny, unfortunately, this has flown by. We've got a few minutes left. Share with us social media. How do people get a hold of you? That type of stuff.
Yeah, I'm most active on my Instagram at DannyVega.ms. Our podcast is on our website, fatfueled.family. That's also our shops there. You can get a consult. I do individual coaching, group coaching. Yeah, that's basically it. The website, the YouTube is just basically, for the most part, our podcast. I'm very not active on YouTube. So if you want to get a hold of me, do it on Instagram or through our website.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and say hi to Mara and the kiddos. And next time I'm in Florida, I'm going to try to hit you guys up if that's okay. We'll go eat a steak and go train or something like that. It'd be a blast. So
absolutely, man. I'd love that.
All right, man. All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you guys back tomorrow. You guys have a great day and Have a great one. Have a good weekend if I don't see you. Bye-bye now.
See ya.